I first met Sarah 7 years ago at day one of our very first ever fYrefly, Saskatchewan. Now, fYrefly is a leadership retreat for LBGTQ youth, and it was co-founded by myself and my husband Anthony, and it is in affiliation with the original in Edmonton. So the camp is 4 days long, it's every summer, and it's open to sexual and gender minority youth ages 14 through 24. But don't think about it like camp, it's more like a conference. So instead of it being about swimming and biking and hiking, this is about raising their self-esteem, improving their personal resiliency, and adding to their leadership skills. So 50 youth come every summer, and they can choose from over 20 different workshops on a wide variety of topics, including how to deal with bullying, how to build their personal resiliency, how to build healthy relationships, and many more. And the whole camp is run by volunteers. We have them from all walks of life. We've got sociologists, psychologists, teachers, police, clergy, artists, and many more. And the repeating theme through the entire camp is that we're trying to tell these youth you're perfectly fine just the way you are. There's nothing you have to change, except maybe feel a little better about yourself. Sounds like a camp we could all go to. So as I tell you about Sarah, I want you to understand that camp is a very safe and private place, and we don't have a lot of outsiders come in, so I'm going to be kind of taking you behind the curtain as I talk about fYrefly and Sarah. Well, I remember the day she arrived for registration. Head down, hood up, staring at the floor, no interaction with anybody. And then in the first session, our coordinator asks each of the youth to stand up and say a little something about themselves. At Sarah's turn, head down, mumbled her name, and that was it. Sadly, that is the behavior of most of the youth when they come on day one. They've been marginalized to such an extent they've built up a coping mechanism, which is to keep a very low profile. Well, of course, over time, we came to learn a lot more about Sarah. She comes from small town Saskatchewan, within an hour's drive of Saskatoon, one of those amazing communities we're blessed to have so many of in this province, where everyone knows everybody, there's huge community spirit, and they do anything for each other. And up until the age of 12, Sarah thrived in that atmosphere, unrecognizable from the girl I just described to you. She excelled in school. She had lots of great friends and was a leader amongst them. She was captain of the volleyball team. She had a wonderful home life. She was the apple of her father's eye and the joy in her mother's heart, the perfect childhood. But then things changed. At age 13, she withdrew. Her marks plummeted. She dropped the volleyball team and she wanted to spend no time with her friends at all, rather preferring to be in her room alone. No matter how people tried, parents, teachers, friends, to reach her and find out what was wrong and bring her back out, there was no coming out for Sarah. You see, she had a secret, and she was convinced no one could ever find out. She was attracted to other girls, not the boys. Well, she tried to like the boys in the early stages. She'd hang out with her girlfriends, and they'd giggle and laugh if a cute boy walked by. But for Sarah, it was all a lie. And that lie isolated her, depressed her, confused her, and made her even more certain it had to remain hidden. And then the bullying started. She kept her hair really, really short. She liked to wear clothes more like a boy's. And as she walked down the school hallways, the taunts of dyke, lesbo, bounced off those hallway walls. And recesses, those were spent in the janitor's storage closet, hiding. And finally, by the age of 15, she could take it no more. And one lonely night, she concluded suicide was her only option. And it was only her parents' frantic 911 call that saved her from that botched attempt. It was the next summer that we met Sarah. And I have to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that today Sarah is thriving. She is age 22. She's finishing her last year of her sociology degree at the U of S. She's in a great relationship with a lovely woman. She gets along pretty well with her parents, and she's got lots of friends, both gay and straight. And best of all for us, she comes back every summer and she's a leader at our Camp fYrefly. Now, was that easy for her? Of course not. She did the hard work required to make that kind of transformation. But she freely shares that it was her time at Camp fYrefly that first summer that was the spark. Well, it's interesting for we volunteers at Camp fYrefly to watch this amazing transformation from day 1 through to day 4, the last day of the youth that attend. Most of them do come in keeping a pretty low profile and not interacting. And by the last day, they're laughing and holding hands and talking, and they don't want to say goodbye. So what happens at Camp fYrefly? Well, I've tried to analyze it, and I've come up with what I think are 3 tipping points that have added to the success over 7 summers and probably 350 youth in total. Number 1, we create a safe place. The only people allowed into camp are the campers and then supportive adults who completely accept these kids. And so for many of them, it's the first time in maybe a couple of years they've felt completely safe. Number 2, they're in the majority. You've got to understand when you're a minority and you come into this group and you're now part of the majority, it's amazingly empowering. And number 3, the repeated message we keep giving them is they're perfectly fine just the way they are. There's nothing wrong with them. And they certainly don't have to drop out of school, succumb to depression, or God forbid, commit suicide. We all need a tribe. No one is a lone wolf. And that's the atmosphere we try to create at Camp fYrefly, to create this sense of not being alone. You see, Sarah came to camp and she thought, there's no one else like me. I'm all alone. Well, I can relate to that. I grew up in Saskatoon many, many years ago as a teenager, and I had to wrestle with my own sexual orientation. And it was not an easy path. There was no Camp fYrefly for me. I had television. I had some role models, Liberace being one. Maybe not the best role model. And the other one for me was Starsky and Hutch. I was convinced they were secret lovers. And I would watch TV every week for my evidence. Well, those were challenging years. And also challenging for my husband, Anthony, who's in the audience here this morning. He grew up in small town Saskatchewan. And he had a great family and great teachers, but everyone was blind to the pain he was having to go through bullying, etc. Well, the good news for Anthony and myself is we made it. It did get better for us. And when I think about that, it just makes me feel so blessed that we did make it. We'd been living together for 17 years and we couldn't get married. And so we decided, yes, we would get married, and we decided we're going to have a big wedding, and no, we're not going to do that. That would be crazy. And so instead, we ran off and eloped. And we came home and told all our friends that we had married, and we said, if you want to congratulate us, please write a check to our fledgling charity called Camp fYrefly Saskatchewan. And that was the seed money that got us started. There was a campaign a number of years ago called It Gets Better. And I'm sure you all know about it. And certainly the youth in our camp, we encourage them to understand it, and we even had them make some of their own videos. But we made one very important change. We added one word. Now. It gets better now. You're okay now. You're a beautiful human being, and there's nothing that you have to change or do differently. So that was a very important message that we wanted to get across. And I think it applies to everyone, doesn't it? Because we all have our anxieties and worries and fears. And to take a page from these brave youth to say, you know, today, some little thing is going to make it just a little bit better right now. That's what these brave youth have taught me. The other thing they've taught me is how fast change can happen. I told you from day 1 to day 4, it's really transformative. And the best way I think I can describe this to you is to imagine that I'm holding a spring, a big industrial spring. And that it represents the sexual psyche of these youth. So because they are who they are, they don't have a normal youth. They are attracted to the same sex. Therefore, they kind of don't date in high school. Therefore, they don't hang out with all the normal crowd of friends. Therefore, they feel like they're on the outside looking in. And then parents and teachers don't understand. And then they feel marginalized and bullied to some extent. And sadly, sometimes the spring breaks. Because the statistics for these youth in terms of school dropout, in terms of depression, and in terms of suicide is many times the national average, I'm sad to say. But at Camp Firefly, they come in, these tightly coiled springs with all this potential, and instead of it breaking, we release it. And that makes all the difference. I'm so pleased to tell you that there is a new program that we have now, that we have the funding for, called Firefly in Schools. And we now have staff that are heading out into the province, visiting various schools and spreading this very important message. So that we have something going on the other 361 days out of the year. It's tough, this is just 4 days. The other very positive story I just have to share kind of excitedly is we now have the full endorsement of the Saskatchewan Rough Riders. In fact, Rob Bagg and Weston Dressler came to camp this summer and spent time with the youth. Something I didn't think I'd quite see in my lifetime. Well, the last day of camp is a very emotional one, and especially the last 2 hours. We have all the youth sit in a sharing circle, and they have the opportunity to share their own stories with each other, to talk about their trials and tribulations, but also how positive the last couple of days had been for them. And it's a very emotional, and it's quite something, and believe me, the Kleenex box gets passed around that circle. But simultaneously, we have the parents and family members who are coming to collect their children at the last day. They come early, and they have their own 2-hour session in their own private room. And there they have some of the instructors explain what happened during camp, but they also have a sharing circle where they get to talk. And you've got to understand, for these parents, they're worried about their kids, they don't understand what's going on, and this is an opportunity for them to find out they're not alone. They have people they can talk to, and believe me, that Kleenex box goes around and around as well. I share all this with you because I believe that no one person has all the answers. Nobody can stand alone and figure things out. We have to create a sense of community. We have to bring people together where they start to share with each other and talk and maybe cry, and that's where healing starts. I told you that Sarah's doing great, and she is. What I didn't tell you is that 2 months after that very first camp she attended, we got a letter in the mail, and it was from her mother. We had never met her, and it was a beautiful and personal and emotional letter in which she shared with us the trials that she had had with her daughter, but then the very positive changes that she had noticed just in the last 2 months since camp. She was essentially thanking us. She was deeply appreciative, and it was heartwarming to get that letter. But I'll tell you, the very best part of that letter, for me, and I'll never ever forget it, was her very last line. She said, "Thank you for giving me my daughter back." Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.